Okay, here we go. Welcome to KNES402 Biomechanics of Sport for this snowy so far spring 2026 semester. I live in Bethesda. Roads around here are still pretty bad, and all the local schools have closed for tomorrow already. UMD hasn't announced anything yet, unless it was very recent, and I haven't seen anything from Prince George's County Public Schools yet, and we often mirror what they do. I don't have any advanced knowledge. I'm just speculating, but I'd be surprised if campus is open tomorrow, but we'll see. Okay, welcome to KNES 402 Sport Biomechanics. I think all of you know me already from recent semesters of KNES 300, but if you don't, my name is Dr. Ross Miller. I will be your instructor for Sport Biomechanics here. And let me start sharing my screen. We'll do a few slides. And this won't take terribly long. I've only got about 15 slides here, so we'll probably be done in 20 minutes or so. I'm getting a message that my internet connection is unstable. Apologies if this doesn't stream super well, but it will be recorded and I'll post it a little bit later. Okay, hopefully you can see my PowerPoint here. And welcome to Biomechanics of Sport. I'll be your instructor, Dr. Miller. Interacting with me, this is an in-person, live, synchronous course. There won't, today's a special exception, of course, because of the snow day, but there won't typically be Zooms or recordings of the lectures in the course. My office hours are drop in anytime that you want, or email me to schedule an appointment if you want to pick a specific time there. I'm holding off on posting the syllabus just yet until we get the snow and the closure business finalized, and then I'll put up a schedule. But I'll give you some an abbreviated schedule at the end of the lecture here. Email is usually the best and quickest way to get in touch with me. I recommend when you do email me, just put your question that you have straight in the writing there, and if it's something that's better addressed with a face-to-face meeting, then we can schedule something or hop on Zoom or whatever. But don't wait to schedule a meeting to ask your question. Put it there in writing, and you'll usually get a quicker resolution, quicker response that way. Okay, welcome to KNES 402. This is a course about the science of athletic performance and training for athletic performance from a biomechanics perspective. And the approach that I kind of take on this course is, if you remember back to the end of KNES 300, when we did some special topics, there was a couple lectures, two or three lectures on sport biomechanics. And this is basically an elaboration and an extension of that special topic. A whole semester just specifically on the biomechanics of humans participating in and playing and competing in sports. And kind of the way that I structured it, this is I think if you count summer and winter, I think this is the 14th time I've taught this class here at University of Maryland, and it's evolved quite a bit over those different iterations into its present state. What I've settled on in recent semesters that I think works fairly well is covering and focusing primarily on the biomechanics of movements that are common to many sports, not necessarily all sports, but many sports. So running, jumping, sprinting, those are sports in and of themselves, primarily in like the track and field and athletics world. But they're also movements that are important and in many cases essential for a wide variety of sports. There's not many sports that don't involve at least one of running or jumping or sprinting. And do you have to be a good runner to be good at basketball, for example? Not necessarily, but it doesn't hurt. Do you have to be a good jumper to be good at baseball, or a good sprinter to be good at football? Not necessarily, but it certainly doesn't hurt to be good at those things, to be good in those other sports. And so that's kind of what most of the course will focus on, is the biomechanics of movements that are common and important for being successful and for competing successfully in many sports. After that, we will also cover biomechanics of cycling, which is kind of my special indulgence, as I used to run a lot. And as I get a little bit older, I can't run as much as I like. So I got into cycling because of that. And I like cycling because it's, one, something that a lot of people in like the typical college student age group haven't really gotten into. Like I would bet most of you have probably done in your own, exercise and own sport participation, have probably done a lot of running and jumping and or sprinting, but many of you probably haven't done a lot of cycling, at least from a competition and a performance perspective. So we'll delve into something that's a little bit less familiar towards the end of the semester, the biomechanics of cycling. It's a nice blend of kind of my two main interests, the interaction of the physiology and biomechanics of the body with the mechanics of a complex device like a bicycle to try to perform, to try to go fast. And then last thing we will cover is again something that's fairly common to training specifically in most sports, and that is weightlifting. Weightlifting is in and of itself a sport like powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting, but it's also an essential component of training in most sports and being prepared to be strong and to be powerful and to be fast and conditioned in most sports. So kind of similar to running and jumping and sprinting. Do you have to be strong to be good at all sports? No, but I can't think of any sports, frankly, where being strong is not helpful and in general beneficial to that sport. Focus will be primarily on performance, not a whole lot on injuries. There'll be a little bit on injuries just because the most important trait of performing as an athlete is being available to perform and not being injured and staying healthy and being able to perform at any level. So there's always kind of a connection to injuries here. I used to think of these things as kind of like there's performance and there's injury prevention. And especially as a competitive athlete, you're always kind of doing a trade-off between those things and trying to toe the line between training just as hard as you can while not quite getting injured, but always kind of being on the threshold of just about to get injured. And over the years, I've kind of changed my perspective on that a little bit, where I think performance and injury prevention can be a little bit more linear and complementary to each other. But still, there's certainly a trade-off between loading the body and conditioning the body and training the body and having that perhaps present an injury risk. But a lot of the class will focus more on performance with kind of some secondary aspects of injury. There won't be a tremendous focus on injury biomechanics in this particular course. We will focus instead on modifiable factors, which from a biomechanics perspective will consist primarily of technique adjustments, like changes in what you're doing with your body, and equipment selection and how that interacts with technique to affect the performance in these sports and these sporting motions. And last comment here is if you can't tell already, I really like this class. This is my favorite class to teach. Sport to me, and I've mentioned this in KNES 300 towards the end of the semester typically, sport is kind of an important gateway, I think, into human health. A lot of us get into working out and exercising fairly early on in life because we want to play sports and be good at sports. And for most of us, unless you're really truly exceptionally good at sports, those opportunities for competition and fairly early on in life, but then hopefully you've come to enjoy the exercise and the training in and of itself and for the health benefits and the exercise benefits, and then you keep it up throughout your life. So I think that's a really important role for sport in getting people into exercise early on in life and keeping that up across the lifespan and maintaining that interest in exercise and performing for daily living, not necessarily for sports performance. In biomechanics, sport often serves kind of a similar role. Um, at least in the United States, there's not a great deal of at least like federal level research funding for sport, whether it's biomechanics or any other discipline. But focusing on sport can often be a way to get students more deeply interested in a field like biomechanics, maybe doing a study or some research on a sport that you personally like. And that can kind of be an entry into getting interested, not just in the sport, but in the biomechanics of that sport. And then from that, getting more broadly interested in biomechanics in general, and then being more invested and more involved in biomechanics broadly because of that initial interest and kind of that gateway in the sports. That was certainly the case for me and is the case for many folks in biomechanics that I know, where you started out focusing on sport and then through that got more broadly interested in biomechanics in general. Okay, a couple cautions while we're still here in the add drop period on what's not in this course. This is not really an advanced version of KNES 300. We don't really pick up where we left off and keep going into more complex, more advanced stuff than what was going on in KNES 300. I would say in terms of like the technical complexity of this course, it's on a similar level to like the most complicated stuff you did in KNES 300. There's nothing in this course from the technical side of things or the calculation side of things that's more difficult or more involved than some of the stuff that you already did in KNES 300. So if you're looking for advanced biomechanics, that's not really what the focus of this course is about. No calculations of the 3D versions of the 2D stuff that we introduced in KNES 300. That's more the realm of graduate level biomechanics most of the time. Like I said, not much on injury. and not a whole lot on like chronic training adaptations. There'll be a little bit, especially when we get into like the weightlifting part of class, on the biomechanics of movements related to training and how to do those movements well and what it means to be doing them well specifically, but not a whole lot on like how the body adapts to like physiologically to chronic training. Not really the particular focus of this course. Okay, so what do we actually do in this class? There's a lot of readings. They're posted on the website. There's 46 of them specifically. Might sound like a lot, but they're all journal articles. None of them are like book chapters or full books or anything. And most of them are fairly short. I think the great majority of them are in the range of like 5 to 10 pages. And usually in those when it's a journal article, like the last page or so will be like a reference list, which is important, but you don't typically have to read the reference list unless there's some key reference you're looking for there. There's a few longer ones that are around like 20 pages, maybe 20 plus pages sometimes. The longer ones are typically what's called a narrative review, and the shorter ones in the 5 to 10 range are typically an original research article. And what are those types of journal articles exactly? The way that the course is structured is we'll do a set of readings on running, a set of readings on jumping, set of readings on sprinting, et cetera, as we work through all the categories. Within each one of those categories, like when we start off here for running for the first category, the first assigned reading that you can find in the readings folder on the website will be a narrative review. That's typically a longer article that kind of tells a story about what's known about the current state of the field, at least at the time when that paper was published, kind of giving you like a fairly broad, superficial lay of the land, like what's known, what's not known, what are some directions for future research to learn even more about this. So that kind of introduces each category that we'll cover. And then the rest of the papers under that category are after that original narrative review are typically original research articles, which are papers reporting on like an experiment, a hypothesis test, or something along those lines where they did like an experiment to learn something scientifically about a more specific topic in under running or jumping or sprinting or whatever. So that's what most of the readings will be like. It may look like a lot, but it's the main effort in the class, and most of them are fairly short. And when I post the syllabus a little bit later this week, it'll include a full reading list of the timing for when you should be reading the certain readings that are assigned. For those readings, obviously there's nothing for today because it's the first day of class, but it's critical to get the most out of what I'll present in the course that you read the paper ahead of time. Like for Wednesday, for example, the reading assigned for Wednesday will be the first article under the first category of running. It's a review article by a running biomechanist named Tom Novacek. It's very, very important to get the most out of what I'll present in the course on Wednesday to have already read that article before you come to class on Wednesday. I'm under no delusions that everyone is necessarily going to do that for all 46 of these papers, but please, if you do nothing else, please at least read the abstract ahead of time. It's typically only like a paragraph or two. You can get through it in a few minutes. So at least read that as you're like, in class waiting for class to start or on your way to class or whatever, and at least get kind of a general sense of what that paper is about that we'll be talking about today. But even better than that would be to read the entire thing, read the entire paper before you come to class that day. And read it fast, just like skim it. Don't worry about like absorbing it too much. Review articles and original research articles, they're generally written for like a graduate level or professional level understanding, and there'll be stuff in there that you probably won't really understand all that well in a lot of these papers. Particularly in like the methods section of the original research articles, it'll be describing things that probably won't make a lot of sense to you. And don't worry about it. Don't worry about completely understanding them. Just read them quickly, get through them, and just have kind of a superficial understanding of what was covered in that paper and just in general what it was about. Then when you get to class that day, then I'll delve into some of the details and emphasize, clarify some of the methodological confusions and emphasize like at least what I think you should take away from that reading or what you should get out of it. But you'll find that being a lot easier to digest during class if you've already read the paper before you come to class, whether or not you fully understand it already before class or not. Okay, 20% of the grade in the course is from participation, so decent chunk of the grade. That's two letter grades there. And how do you get it? There will be some in-class activities that we will do live and in class that are participation slash completion based. Meaning, yeah, there'll be some gradation to, doing it, correctly or not, but that doesn't really factor into the grade. You get the credit for participating for that day if you're there that day and do the participation, whether or not you like answer correctly or not. Each time we do that is 1% out of that 20%. So you accumulate, 20 of those throughout the 15, 16 week semester here, and then you'll max out that 20%. They'll be unscheduled, unannounced, and excused because they're unscheduled. They'll be excusable if you have like an excused absence for that day. Don't worry if you miss a couple of them. There will be more. I don't know exactly how many there's going to be. I kind of do this as I go. But there's going to be more than 20 of them. So each one is worth 1%, and the maximum you can get is 20%. But there's typically like 25-ish of them. So if you miss one here and there, it's not too much of an effect on the grade typically, as long as you don't miss a whole lot of them. So if you miss a few, it's not really a big deal in terms of affecting the overall grade or not maxing out that 20% that you get from participation. What are they exactly? What will we be doing? We'll have an opportunity for the first one at the end of the lecture here today. But it's a mix of sometimes we'll be calculating something, sometimes we'll simply be discussing or talking about something, and sometimes we'll even go into the lab or into some other space or in the classroom and do a little bit of a biomechanics experiment. So a variety of different things that we'll do for that participation component of the course. If you're doing the math there, there's going to be about 25 of them. And I think if you throw out spring break, there's like 15 weeks that we meet for class. So there'll be like one or two of these per week. If you want a little bit of a hint, I've noticed that attendance on Fridays tends to be not the best in the world. And I'm not the kind of person that likes to deliberately schedule something when I know attendance isn't going to be super high. So generally on Mondays and Wednesdays, those are pretty good days to expect that we might do a participation activity. Fridays, I tend to not do them quite as often. Okay, that's only 20%. How do you get the other 80%? There'll be five homework problems based on some problem solving kind of situations. Five of those, each worth 8% for 40% of the grade. What do I mean there by problem solving? It'll typically be describing an athlete or a group of athletes that have a problem, have something that they're trying to accomplish, something that they're trying to solve or get better at or improve at. And you will have to use biomechanics and sport biomechanics to describe and justify what you think they should do to solve that problem. The homeworks are a little bit different from like the lab reports in KNES 300, for example. They're nowhere near as long as the lab reports. What you'll be submitting for the homeworks is maybe like a page or two of like written material at the most. I think the longest one is typically around 2 pages, so they're not super long. On those lab reports, there was typically like a singular correct answer for most of the stuff, right? On the homework problems here, it's a little bit more ambiguous. There's lots of different ways that you could answer them that would be worth full credit. You don't necessarily have to answer them the way that I would answer them. What you do need to do is no matter how you answer them, along with like giving an answer, like I think this athlete should do this to address the problem, you should include an explanation on why you think they should do that. And in particular, include an explanation justified by biomechanics or based on sport biomechanics, why you think this would be a good solution to their problem. If it ends up not necessarily being a great solution or the best solution or the one that I would pick, that's okay. You can still get full credit for coming up with a biomechanics-based solution and justifying with biomechanics why you think that's a good solution. The exams will be kind of similar to that. There's a midterm and a final, each worth 25%. Midterm will be around middle of the semester. Final, of course, and finals week towards the end of the semester. And they will be similar to the homeworks, where it's like case study, problem solution type things, where there's an athlete who's having an issue or something that they want to accomplish, and you will be stating how you think they should accomplish that and justifying it with biomechanics based on the content from the course. And the exams are taken online on Canvas. Okay, a little bit of a caution on the homeworks. I don't set out to try to make this a difficult course. It's kind of the level of difficulty of KNES 300, I think, where, most students, especially those of you electing here to take a second biomechanics course, I'm guessing you probably didn't find KNES 300 to be like a super hard class. I don't try to make it a hard class. I don't try to make it an easy class. I try to make it an interesting class. I think there's parts of it that are hard, or at least for many students, parts of it that are difficult, but it's not a terribly overall, like overwhelmingly difficult class overall. The homeworks in this course are kind of similar, where there's not really like a question that's asked on the homework where you can answer it by like delving deeply into the readings. Like, oh, from this journal article, like here's the answer to that particular question. It's more using the readings to kind of think outside the box a little bit and elaborate and extrapolate a little bit, and using the readings, using the content from the readings to justify a solution that you come up with. So don't postpone getting started on the homework because they may take you a little bit longer than you may initially anticipate that something like that might take, because it's not something where you simply have to go through the readings, find the answer, okay, there it is, put it into the homework. You're going to have to think a little bit. It's going to be a little bit more difficult than you might initially expect the homework might take just from glancing at it. So I have a couple things here that motivational quotes on why I like to do it that way. This is a fella, Conrad Hawley. Some of you know that I'm from Ames, Iowa, and I'm a big Iowa State university sports fan. It's my hometown team. Iowa has no pro teams in any sport, so people get really into the college sports, and I'm really into my alma mater, the Iowa State Cyclones, when it comes to sports. Conrad Hawley was a player on our bench in basketball some years ago who hardly ever played, but was just a very energetic, like motivational guy. And his quote here says, "I love it when things." Oh, sorry. Cooter says, I love it when things are hard because I know it's going to suck, and then you get better. You don't get better when stuff is easy. And so that's the intent of the homeworks, is making them challenge you a little bit and think outside the box a little bit, and then making it a little bit difficult. Then you get to the exams and you've already done this in like a low stress setting because you have lots of time to do the homeworks, and then the exams probably won't seem quite as difficult. So kind of similar to what I like to do in KNES 300 with the quizzes, where you kind of practice taking the exam ahead of time in a low stress, unlimited time setting. Then when you get to the limited time, more stressful setting for the exams, it's not so hard because you've already done it a few times. Okay, there's a lot of use of AI these days. One of my favorite quotes here concerning AI is from this fellow on the left here, Ted Chiang. He's not a sport biomechanist. He is a well-known short story sci-fi author, and he has a quote here that I really like. You can maybe put like the homeworks into ChatGPT and see what answers it gives you. You're going to take the exams online. Maybe you can paste the question into an AI tool and see what it gets. I haven't checked. Maybe it gives good answers. Maybe it doesn't. I haven't taken a look. It might. The point here, though, is regardless of whether an AI tool gives you a good answer or not, you're kind of cheating yourselves. One thing that I would really encourage you to keep in mind as you're going through a course like this is a 400 level class. You already took the 300 level version. Now you're taking, a 400 level elective. This is probably the last time that most of you will ever take a biomechanics class, and kind of your last opportunity to learn something about biomechanics. And my main concern these days as a middle-aged adult who didn't have AI growing up in school, and now it's become a very prominent thing in education and in higher education specifically, is I worry that we're taking away the challenge of thinking. I worry that we're making it too easy to quickly get quality answers and removing the challenge of arriving at that quality answer. And that challenge is really important. I like his quote that he has here. He says, using ChatGPT to like your essay is like bringing a forklift into the weight room. You're never going to improve your cognitive fitness that way, right? If I want to lift 225 pounds on my squat, I could bring a forklift into the weight room and easily lift that 225 pounds. That accomplished the goal of lifting the 225 pounds, but I didn't do it, right? I used something else to do it, but I didn't gain the strength and the fitness to be able to do that. Okay? Then he elaborates here. He says, building strength is, oh, shoot, come on. And I won't read you the whole thing, but it's an argument against using AI tools to do writing for you because you're circumventing the challenge and the learning process of doing that writing. So it's probably going to be tempting, especially in a class like this where there's a lot of writing of your answers and things like that, and taking exams online and things like that, to try to use a tool like that. And if you do use a tool like that, I would encourage you to think about whether you're actually learning something when you do that versus if you're just turning in a completed assignment but don't really understand how you thought your way through to get that solution there. So just some stuff to keep in mind as you're going through this course and any of your courses. Last but not least, quote from one of my favorite books here, Dune. It's a popular movie these days, but it's just based on a book, if you weren't already aware. It says, once men turned their thinking over to machines in the hope that this would set them free, but this only prevented other men within machines to enslave them. So I think we're getting too dependent on AI tools. I see it in some of my graduate students where they have a very difficult time drafting abstracts and drafting manuscripts without AI drafting it for them, and that starts to concern me as a little bit. Maybe I'm overly concerned. I'm a middle-aged adult now. Maybe I'm just out of touch, but I do worry a little bit that we're losing the ability to think a little bit. So when you have an opportunity like this to think, even if maybe you don't come up with a better answer than ChatGPT comes up with, you're gaining the experience and the cognitive fitness of doing that thinking when you don't use a tool like that. So stuff to keep in mind. Okay, brief review here of physics and mechanics from KNES 300, just to wrap things up here. This will be a real quick review. There's going to be a physics-based formula sheet posted on the website to remind you of some of the physics that are involved in biomechanics in general. Probably not something you'll have to actually use in this course. This is mostly just a refresher for what you should already know recently from KNES 300. And in general, there's two main approaches for understanding how mechanics explains motion, not just sports motion, but any motion. There's a force-based approach, which is Newton's second law, F equals ma, and that gives rise to the impulse-momentum relationship. And there's an energy-based approach, which is predicated on the first law of thermodynamics and the work-energy theorem. Both ways of how we can understand how forces applied to the body affect the motion of the body. Impulse momentum through time-varying forces affecting the velocity of a mass, and the energy-based approach, work energy theorem, on how those forces perform work on the body and either add or subtract energy and energy of motion and potential energy of motion from the body. Regardless of which perspective or which approach you're doing there, the goal is to be able to describe sport movement and performance using the language of mechanics. That language perspective is something I'm real big on KNES 300. Like, I can describe to you how my elbow works in terms of the language of English. Math and physics is just another way. Using the language of math and physics is just another way to describe how that works. So that's how I kind of like to think about math and physics, is it's a language different from the English language of describing how something works. If you want to set yourself up for success here in this particular course, review the formula sheet that I'm going to post. And it'll have, terms like work and energy and power and acceleration and stuff like that. Stick with those physics-based terms for when you're describing stuff in this class. When you're giving answers, stick to describing movement and sport motions and mechanics and training and whatnot using terms that have these clear, well-defined definitions in physics. That's really the strength of a physics-focused subdiscipline of kinesiology like biomechanics, in that we have these very well-described, well-defined terms: force, power, work, energy. These are things that are very directly and simply defined in physics that have clear meanings in terms of how they relate force to motion of the body. Okay. Stay away from more jargony, sports sciencey type terms like strength and balance and flexibility and agility and stuff like that. Those are certainly relevant traits for being good at sports, but strength, for example, is not a physically well-defined term. Balance and coordination is not a physically well-defined term. If you're going to use those terms, define them in terms of the physics. Like by strength, I mean maximize symmetric muscle force. By agility, I mean the ability to change the direction of your heading, change the direction of your acceleration or velocity or whatever in a quick amount of time. Give a physics-based definition for those terms if you're going to use those terms. Okay, a little bit of fun here to wrap up. Here are two videos of sprinters. One of these athletes is an elite sprinter, a professional sprinter, somebody that sprinted as an athlete, as a career racing in track and field. They were actually one of the greatest 400-meter sprinters of all time. And then the other athlete here is a NFL cornerback, I think. So somebody who's very fast, but is not fast compared to a true world-class elite sprinter. As fast as like the guys in the NFL or look sometimes, they are nowhere close to as fast as like professional track and field runners. The fastest people in the NFL will get absolutely smoked by the best like track and field sprinters. So based on these two videos here, side by side, I'll see if I can get them to play simultaneously here. So here's two athletes, one on the left and one on the right. And if you had to guess which one is the elite sprinter and which one is the football player, which would you pick and why? So take a minute or two and watch that. And then if you want to unmute and bravely speak up or just put it in the chat or something, let me know what you think there. Which one here do we think is the elite sprinter and which one's the sub-elite sprinter? And more importantly, why? Like, why are you saying the one on the left or the one on the right is the elite sprinter? Now, thinking back to KNES 300, there's a lecture on sprinting in there. What was mechanically, what was the number one most important variable for top sprinting speed? What do you have to do mechanically with the force you're producing to sprint fast? What's the most important thing there? Anyone remember?
Is it the vertical force?
Vertical force, right? Vertical ground reaction force. As you run faster and faster, you spend less and less time with your foot on the ground. And when your foot's on the ground, that's the time that you have to generate a really big force that's big enough such that when you average it over that entire stride, the amount of time your foot's on the ground, and plus including the time when your foot's airborne and you're not producing any force, so a bunch of zeros included in the averaging, you have to produce a big enough force while your foot's on the ground such that the average force over the whole stride, including all the zeros in the airborne phase, averages out to your body weight. Okay. If you produce a force on average above your body weight, then you'll fly, you'll take off, that's jumping. If you produce a force lower than your body weight, then every step you'll sink, 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 sink into the ground a little bit. Okay. So to sprint at a steady speed over level ground, sprint, 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 you have to produce a big enough force when your foot's on the ground so that it averages out vertically to your body weight over successive strides there. Okay. Now, as you go faster and faster, you necessarily spend less and less time with your foot on the ground. And so you have to produce larger and larger force faster and faster in the vertical direction, less and less time. Okay, so that's the number one kind of key thing, at least for top speed in sprinting. The athlete here, who is the elite sprinter, what do we think? Anyone want to take a guess? Left or right? A couple answers in the chat here. Let me see. Say left because they are landing with the foot more planted in the ground. And also say the one on the left. So two votes for the left here. Okay. So left has a strong lead here. Anybody else think it's the one on the left? How about the one on the right? Anybody think the one on the right is the elite sprinter? Okay, it is in fact the one on the left. The sprinter on the left is Jeremy Warner. He was in like the time period of like 2005 to 2010-ish. He was the best 400-meter runner in the world. I think he held the world record at some point. I'm not 100% sure of that. He certainly was like a world champion. I'm not sure he ever held the world record. But he was a elite 400-meter sprinter. The individual on the right, I'm not 100% sure who it is, but they said it's a professional NFL football player. The number one thing that I look at here is what Will pointed out in the chat. And if you look closely, the athlete here on the left, their foot lands quite a bit closer to being more directly under where you might expect their center of mass is. Okay. And compared to the athlete on the right, they land with their foot a little bit more out in front of them. Okay. It's very subtle. It's kind of hard to see unless they're going in slow motion like this. But even landing with your foot a little bit more out in front there, that takes you away from what's called in sprinting a position of strength, where you have your foot directly under your body, and that vertical force will line up directly with your center of mass. And it'll be, at least in sprinting, what's called an efficient use of that force, where the largest fraction of the force is directed straight underneath you, supporting your body weight vertically. If it's misaligned a little bit, then the more misaligned it is, the more torque that vertical force produces about your center mass to spin you forwards or backwards, which is not what you want to do when you're trying to stay upright and level and sprint. So that's the number one thing that I look for in these athletes. Now, Here we have each one with the person sprinting. So this is Jeremy Warner here, and you see the trace of the forces under their feet. And remember, we said, I think Joy pointed out, the key thing for sprinting is you have to produce big vertical forces. Okay. But if I compare these two here, so here's Jeremy Warner, the elite 400 meter sprinter, and here's the NFL player, a fast but sub-elite sprinter. Now watch Warner's peak force here under his feet. That time he did about a 500-pound peak. He's pretty consistent here. That time he did a little bit higher, a little bit over 500 pounds. And then last year he does about 500 pounds again. So he's producing a peak force of about 500 pounds. And I guarantee you he's running considerably faster there than the NFL player here. And let's see what their peak force looks like. Almost 800 pounds, about 700 pounds. Right? So you get the idea. The slower person is producing bigger vertical forces, right? That seems to be in contrast to what I just said, where to go fast, if the person on the elite sprinter on the previous slide is running faster, wouldn't we expect them to produce larger vertical forces? So there's a key thing I'm missing here. What am I missing? It's not just producing large vertical forces in an absolute sense. What factor here am I leaving out so far? Anyone remember that one? So in an absolute sense, 800 pounds is bigger than 500 pounds, right? But look at the bodies of these two. Here's the NFL player. Here's the 400 meter runner, right? What's different about them? Shane has got it in the chat here. It's body weight, right? The 400 meter runner is quite a bit skinnier, smaller. So they're both, strong, muscular individuals. But this person, I would say, they look pretty athletic. This person is jacked. They're big. They've got a lot of muscle all over the body here. Okay. So it's not just large vertical forces in an absolute sense, it's large vertical forces relative to your body weight. So if we were to take these forces in pounds here and scale them by the weight of these athletes, which is probably, for this NFL player, probably well over 200 pounds, and for this guy here, it might be 150, 160 pounds. Then in terms of producing large vertical forces relative to your body weight, I guarantee you here the elite sprinter is actually producing the larger forces from that perspective. So it's not always just about what is happening force-wise outside the body. We have to factor in the traits, the characteristics of the body itself and how that specific force relates to that specific body. Okay, last thing we'll do here is we have our first participation opportunity. And do not worry if you are a student watching this recording later. I think about half the class is here today. There's three different ways you can earn this participation opportunity. You can think about it for those of you who are here, you can think about it for a few minutes right now and just say verbally, and I'll write it down. You can think about it for a few minutes right now and type it into the chat. Or you can email it to me by the end of the week, by Friday here. And what do we have to do here exactly? What's the participation opportunity? I'd like to hear from everybody. What specifically do you want to learn about in this course? Okay. Make it something that's fairly specific movement or task in a specific sport. And throughout the semester, I'll do my best to cover that at some point in some non-trivial, non-superficial way to kind of integrate that into the discussion and my presentation of the paper that's most relevant to that there. I do that as kind of an attendance encourager in that I won't tell you when that's going to happen exactly, but at some point throughout the semester, when it makes sense and when it's possible to do that, I'll integrate that into there. So that is your task as we end here for our first participation. Your plus 1% for the first participation opportunity is let me know through one of these three means here, either saying it or writing it in the chat or just emailing it to me. What would you like to? Looks like I lost internet there for a second. Everybody still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Did you catch the part about the participation opportunity?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that is all I had for today. I'm going to stop the recording here. Hopefully, it's still recorded. The recording is still running. Hopefully, it didn't start over here. That's it for today. You can either email me your response by Friday for that participation opportunity, or just stay here and tell it to me now, or think about it for a bit and put it in the chat. And any of those is fine for that. Okay, that is it for today. I'm going to stop the recording, and we will hopefully see you on Wednesday. Oh, for Wednesday, please read and take a look at the first reading for running, and the PDFs for those are all on the website. So if you go to the website and go to readings, running, the first one there is Novacek, and please read that for Wednesday.